All right, welcome everyone to this week's presentation from DBA Fundamentals in Mango.
Mango.
So today is Josephine Bush talking about handling Azure SQL auditing with ease. Today is August 22nd, 2023. As you see on my screen, in the top right-hand corner, you'll actually see the three leaders of the DBA Fundamentals group, Steve Cantrell, Shane O'Neill, and myself, Kevin Wilkie. And the easiest way to get hold of us is through Twitter at the moment. Just reach out to us there and we'll answer any questions you may have. Below that is the several ways you can get hold of us via social media. The first one obviously is Meetup, where most of you probably found our group and actually today's presentation. Below that is dbafund.org, our website. Has all of our past presentations as well as our future presentations, so that if you have any questions, it's the easiest way to get to actually see all of our presentations themselves. Below that is one of my favorite sites on the web, dbafundtube.com. It's our little version of YouTube, as all of our presentations. Be sure to like and subscribe to our presentations on there so you can actually see when the latest presentation is available for in recorded view. Below that is our Twitter handle, DBA Fun, our Slack channel, and our LinkedIn group, where we tend to process a lot of stuff.
Oh, hey, Kevin, they're saying they see my desktop, so they're not seeing your slide.
Oh, because okay, that's right.
Yeah, because I shared. Yeah,
I
can unshare if you want to share your slide.
Yeah, let me share my slide here for the next 2 minutes. Is about all it is.
Okay.
Yeah, that one. Now that'll make more sense for all I talked about. You can see our little fun different variations in social media you can get to for us. All right. As I was saying, sessions are being recorded and usually be available within 1 to 2 days on our website, dbafundtube.com. Yep. All right. Yep. So yeah, make sure to like and subscribe so you can see it when it becomes available. Upcoming conferences. This is one of my favorite slides I have put out here recently. Just talking about some conferences that you can go to or be at least aware of. In the top left side, you'll see Data Mosh Pit. It is in Germany. You can talk about data and metal as much as you want there on September 16th. On the right-hand side is the Future Data Driven Summit 2023, which I am actually part of. Be sure to come out to that one. There'll be talks about anything from Power BI to SQL Server, Azure, Snowflake, and a whole plethora of things in between, getting all kinds of stuff out there. I think it's five channels you can watch this year. So there's a lot of stuff. We have over 50 presenters as well. So it should be a lot of fun, a lot of goodness. And below that, and that is on September 27th this year. And below that is Microsoft Ignite on November 15th through 16th, where Microsoft will talk about all kinds of goodness. And as always, this year is Past Data Community Summit 2023 in person in Seattle on November 14th through 17th. If you have not yet signed up for it, please be sure to using the code MFFTUG150, so you'll save $150 on the 3-day pass to it this year as well. As always, be sure to turn off your videos and please be sure to mute yourself. I'll be doing that here in just a minute so we can focus on Josephine and Mango. And please, as always, be sure to type any questions you have into our chat so that we'll talk through any questions you have and answer them as best we can. With that, I give a little brief bio of Josephine, and with that, over to her.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Of course, Mango comes right in the middle of your part, right? He's like, oh, hey, we're doing this. He somehow knows we're on camera, and he's like, oh, yay, I'm coming. So, it reminds me that speaking of future data driven, I am in that. And if you're interested in seeing about, using Terraform to create your Azure SQL resources, then I'll be presenting that at that conference. Just got to get that slide deck together, actually. That reminds me, thank you. So let's get started here. Gonna get into my slideshow. Okay, so hopefully this helps you handle Azure SQL Auditing with ease when we're done here with this whole thing. And so I'm Josephine, and I am Data Platform MVP, and I blog on SQL Kitty, and you can find me on Twitter at Hello SQL Kitty. And I have a couple of books here, and then this one series is actually for migrating SQL Server to Azure's Azure SQL Managed Instance. So that's kind of the stuff, big projects I've worked on in recent years. So first, just really quickly, oh, and by the way, this is Mango. He likes to be part of any video calls, work, personal, whatever it is, Mango would like to be there. I think he was sad I was on staycation because there were no meetings. Actually, he may have been depressed. My husband's like, I think he's depressed because we're not having meetings. Anyway, so Mango's a hard worker. So first of all, what is auditing, right? So to begin with, like, what are we doing with auditing, right? We're going to be making sure that we're going to see like proper use, right? What people are doing in there, right? If you don't audit, you don't actually have any clue what people are doing. Maybe they're doing everything that you're expecting them to. Maybe they're misusing it in some way. They don't realize, oh, they're not supposed to. And most people, I don't catch them doing something malicious, right? So that isn't really the intention of the auditing, right? It's mainly just to know what's going on. So if somebody comes to you and says something is broken, then you could say, oh, well, I know nothing changed, right? That's the main thing. So it's important to, to do this for yourself, for your sanity. That's why I set it up originally. My company didn't want me, they did not want me to set it up, but they didn't really know about it or think maybe it was important, right? And so for me and my sanity, it was helpful because then you could see in the audit record, like who changed something, did that break something maybe, or who used something. Depends on how much you want to audit, for example. And I always forget to update this slide. I say SQL Server, but it does apply because anything anyone does in SQL Server, Azure SQL, Azure Managed Instance, that kind of stuff is all auditable. Like you can see anything anyone does.
So Josephine, somehow you're not
Yeah.
sharing your screen anymore.
Oh, that's weird. Oh, I noticed that it like kind of popped out for a sec to this Teams and then it popped out. Oh, I didn't realize that. That was weird. I haven't had that happen. Okay, let's go back. Start over. Always something. Okay, is that good now? Oh, I see the
That's
red
good.
line. Okay, I'll keep an eye out because Teams popped up over my slides and I didn't realize it stopped sharing. So, okay, so in case you missed anything, this was my why slide, right? So I said why, right? So basically anything you can audit anything, pretty much anything in SQL Server. And it helps you more than anyone else. It helps you, well, especially if you have some kind of audit compliance stuff, you may already be required to do this. And so then, you need to know the ins and outs. So this is a quick overview of your options, right? So you have Azure SQL. So first I'll go with SQL Server VM because I have a whole presentation. So if you're still on SQL Server, and hey, I don't begrudge you that because a lot of people are still, my old company we had tons of stuff on SQL Server still. So that has SQL Server Audit, has extended events. You have the disks, right? You have VM, you have full access to the disks. You put it on the storage. You put your audit files on the storage, right? So that's I have a bunch of stuff on that. Actually, I have a GitHub. It's SQL Kitty out in GitHub. And so that's all out there if you want to see that presentation or the scripts. So then we go, but after that, I say, it's very similar in Managed Instance and AWS, right? The RDS stuff. You can do SQL Server Audit, you can do extended events, but of course you don't have the disk, you don't have a VM, right? So you have to use a cloud storage. And then finally, we have Azure SQL. And technically SQL Server Audit is not available, but it's not entirely true because you can use the portal to configure. You just can't go in SSMS like you can with SQL Server Managed Instance RDS and like click in there, right click, and start adding your audits to your Azure SQL setup. You can use extended events though, and you can do that from SSMS by right clicking and such. So like I said, it's the quasi equivalent in the portal is how you do this. So that's what we're going to go over today is the Azure SQL Database stuff, because it is different. Like Managed Instance RDS, if you know SQL Server on a VM, then you're going to be pretty good with the audit. But in Azure SQL, it's a bit different. So I'll take a pause for a sec to see if there's any questions so far. It sounds like somebody's smoke detector is running out of battery. I can hear it. I hate that. It usually happens in the middle of the night for me when I'm, 3 a.m. when I'm trying to sleep. And it's like, dang, I got to get out of the ladder and like have vaulted ceilings. Anyway, so brings back a whole middle of the night traumatic memory of changing smoke detector batteries. Anyway. Okay, well, I'll keep going. I can't see the chat. So if Kevin, you can feed that to me because I can't right now. I'm in full present mode, but I'll assume there's no questions for now, and then we'll just keep rolling. There'll be other times too down here we can ask more questions. So basically, similar to SQL Server Audit, you can audit at the server level and the database, or the database level. You can do both, but I wouldn't do both. Don't do both because then you're getting double audit data, right? So you don't want to do that. So you could do both, but I would say don't do that. And so then you can see anything everyone does in Azure. So by default, Azure SQL Database, when you turn it on, it gets everything. So you get everything in the kitchen sink, like everything in there, because it's using these audit action groups. So if you're familiar with SQL Server Audit, you'll know from setting it up, but there's audit action groups you can select, and there's a whole bunch of them. And these ones I usually don't use because they're so, there's so much. It's very fruitful. It's a very fruitful auditing. And if you get so much, you can't pick through it, especially with SQL Server. When you audit so much, it can be difficult to stop the audit depending on how busy your server is. It can be difficult to weed through it because it's so big and the files get so big, it's hard to query them. Now with Azure SQL, I haven't found that to be the case so much. I have never had as busy or as big an Azure SQL database as I have a SQL Server though. So I warned you, when using the default audit actions, it could get kind of big and it could be hard to pick through potentially. So, but this is when you just turn it on. By default, you get these groups, it gets everything. So that being said, you can audit fewer actions, right? You could say, I want to modify, I want to set the policy to something else. You could get the policy to see what it is right now. So you just use Azure PowerShell, which I just do this. You could do it from your local PowerShell, like on your computer, right? You could set that all up to work that way. So I just do it for the CLI. Sometimes if I'm just doing a little one-off thing, I might just do it through the CLI. So in this case, that's what you're seeing in the screenshot here. And so this is getting your resource group name and your server name, like getting the audit policy. So for right now, we see there that it's actually those default groups. That means it's audit action groups, right? It's going to get everything happening on your Azure SQL database. So that could be good or bad, depending on how much it is. And then you'll discover if you've never audited before, you'll see all kinds of things that you think, what is that user can't be running like at version or what, like things that's at the engine, the SQL engine is doing those things in the background to support their queries. So that's what you're also going to get is all the stuff happening in the background to support people's queries that they're running. So that was eye-opening to me years ago when I started this. I was like, wow, look at all that stuff. I mean, I kind of assumed there was stuff going on and never really thought that the audit would catch it all. And it does. It catches a lot of stuff. So that's a lot of times to support like more of the CRUD stuff, like the selecting, like maybe not so much every like CRUD and everything, but like selects, the updates, delete type stuff. It, especially with selects, it does a lot of that in the background stuff. So anyway, I like to weed this down. So like a bit. So these action groups are ones you could choose from. First, Azure SQL. So some of these may be familiar to you because they are also in SQL Server. Some of them are not. So there's, I think I have on the resources slide, there's some overlap between SQL Server and Azure SQL Database and the audit action groups. So some exist only in SQL Server, some only exist in Azure SQL Database, and then some overlap. So these are the options you get in Azure SQL. So what I like to do is pare it down. And this looks like a lot. It's a very busy slide. And it looks like a ton here, but this is actually auditing far, 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 far less than the 3 default groups. So these just get some, like, anytime somebody changes permissions, anytime somebody makes some DDL type changes, right? That's what this is going to get. Some things like, oh, I used to change a password, that kind of stuff. That's more, to me, from at least a database administrator's perspective, the kind of things that can break something in the database itself. Like when people change data, now that could break the app, that could break everything, like, right, of course. But from a database perspective, I like to more audit the things that really impact from the DBA side of things, or, maybe if you're a database engineer even too, things that really impact like structural changes or perms changes, right? So that's kind of why I pare that down. I'll be honest with you, where I work currently, I have it turned on to do just audit everything, because mainly a lot of our databases aren't as busy as some of the ones I've worked on, like SQL Server before, but also because we're trying to figure out, like, if you're trying to figure out why something's hitting database 30,000 times, or what's going, some other kinds of more nuanced things with the app, and trying to figure out like which app is hitting, like what queries are doing what, all kinds of things, like you will need all that auditing, right? So I just say be careful, because if you have a really, really busy production server and you turn on auditing to the max, like just the default, you might have a lot, you might be paying for a lot, because it just gets so big too. I mean, there's just factors to consider, right? So it just depends on your use case. So I'll just take a pause for a sec. Does anybody have any questions about that audit action group stuff?
As we said earlier, make sure to put that into the chat. But as of right now, there is nothing in the chat, so please move forward.
Okay, cool. So it is this simple. You go into the portal, so you're enabling it at the server level. I recommend just doing it at the server level, and it'll get all the databases on this server the same way, right? It's such a weird concept. I say server. I mean, it's that the Azure SQL database, the server level of the collection of databases that you put on there, right? So I'm just going to call it server in this case. So you enable it here. And then you can also enable the support operations for Microsoft, like what, they might be doing things in the background as well. So you can actually log that with your audit, or you can put it somewhere else. So I usually just put it in the same place. So I put it all together.
So we have a question now before you go on.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Which PowerShell module for Azure, or is it the old Azure RM module?
That's a good question. I usually just use the CLI for this, but then I think I've used, like, I don't remember the module name. I have to look, but because I've used it locally, it's like, I don't think it's Azure RM, as I recall. I think it's like something else new. I'll look it up and see. I'm pretty sure it's like, I can't remember now, because I've used Azure PowerShell locally, but I can't remember the module name. It may be Azure RM. Anyway, I think, do I have anything PowerShell memory? So I can't remember. Let me just say I don't know. That was a long way to say I'm not sure. But I can look it up. Maybe I can do it quickly at the end here. Let's see how much time I have left. So if you might have seen on this last slide, you get 3 destinations. So we'll go through these in turn. So that's, you can put it in multiple places depending on what you want to do with it. And I'll tell you my favorite way, and that's what we're going to go through. But first we have the storage. And like, you can safely assume, you know, that actually you can create storage here too if you don't have one already. That's sort of a difference than the other ones don't have like a create new necessarily, like Log Analytics. You have to create it first, but in this case, you could create a new one, you could put it in there, and then it stores it in the blob, right, as as an XCL file, because SQL Server Audit is actually extended events under the hood. And so in here, in SQL Server, it would be a .SQL audit file. Here, it will be an XCL file. What I don't like about the storage, and why I say I don't use this, because it puts it in this folder, and then this subfolder, and then this subfolder, and then this date, and then this file. And now I've got to like use PowerShell to loop through somehow, and I found that to be cumbersome. So I didn't like that method because I found a better way. And this here Event Hub I have not used. So I'll be honest with you, I made some screenshots so you could see it, because if you already use Event Hub, this may be helpful to you to put your auditing in there. So you can put this in here. There was some complicating factor for me, especially was something this, and then the collecting this, and the JSON, and then that just lost me. And I thought, no, I think I won't use this. So maybe if you're already using Event Hub for something else and you're comfortable, this could be a good option for you. But my favorite is Log Analytics. And so I create a Log Analytics workspace, and then I come in here and I turn on the auditing, click the checkbox for Log Analytics, and then choose it. Boom, that's it. Save, it does it. It's that easy. It's a lot easier in terms of turning it on and setting it up and just letting it run, especially if you're not that comfortable with, you don't have to use the PowerShell. You don't have to change the default audit action groups if you're not comfortable, and they've made it very easy. Now, unlike SQL Server Audit, I don't think it's that complicated, but at the same time, it's not that easy. There's a little button and a checkbox, and boom, you're good. And then the thing I thought was tricky is that I told you enable it at the server level, right? Which you can't actually view the audit logs from the database side at the server level. You actually have to go into each SQL database to click view audit logs, and then Log Analytics, and then it'll bring you over here. And I have a query that I use that I like for putting this all in columns and making it look pretty and nice, easy to read. But honestly, I wouldn't view the audit data that way, because the way I do this is that I put all my SQL databases into the same Log Analytics workspace, and I don't go clicking around to every single database, right, to go view audit logs. And so that's just one way. Like, if you know, oh, well, I just want to go into this one database and look and click this view audit logs, you could do that. Or you can just go directly to your Log Analytics workspace. Unfortunately, this workspace summary, which I find very nice for a high-level overview of what's going on, this nice little dashboard, is being deprecated. And I'm hoping they'll change their mind, but I haven't contacted anyone, so I'm not sure. They can't read my mind. So I may have to say something to somebody at some point, because I actually really like this. And this is going to go away. That does not mean that you cannot query the logs, because there is still a way to just go straight into the logs. Like, there's this little button on this page, here are logs, but on the main page of your Log Analytics workspace, there is a logs as well. So you can always do that. But what I just liked about this is you're like, oh, quick look. I know, okay, yep, things are happening. I can see it by database. I can see it by audit distribution by types, the action groups, right? And the IPs and all. There's more panels off to the right that get it so small you can't read anything on the slide. So I just left that. But there is this new workbooks. This is a new thing well, new, relatively new, I suppose, now, but so it brings you to this. So you could see this is the workspace summary down here, which is now deprecated, deprecated. It's still there. You can still use it, but now down here, you've got a workbooks. There's a bunch of default stuff. I clicked all around in all these default ones. It did not give me what I wanted to see, like a dashboard in that same way that the workspace summary was so nice. But you can create your own workbook. So I'm distracted by other, we have this giant data warehousing project at my work right now. So I have not had time to work on a workbook, but I would like to create a workbook that is like this nice dashboard here, so that, you know, we had something similar over in our workbook you can just click on and have a nice dashboard. So that's to be determined. I'd really like to do that sometime later this year, maybe early next year. But in the interim, I have created this one here. I created, so you see, like, this is like audit last day is like what's happened the last day, for example. So you can create a workbook, and then that looks like this basically when you open it. It just gives you a quick look what's going on. Last, you know, it's only the first 250 rows in here and stuff. So I'm not sure how excited I am about this specific workbook, but there's hope, there's promise that I can come up with a better workbook setup. Anyway, just so you know that this is new. This is the first time I actually added this to the slide deck because this changed recently, fairly recently anyway. So that being said, what query am I using to get that, right? So this is the query itself. That's basically when you go in your log analytics workspace, you just go to logs. You don't need a workbook. You don't need a summary. You don't need any of that to query the data itself. And on Kusto likes very powerful language. If you know SQL, which probably a lot of you, I'm guessing most of you do, if you're in database world and on this group, that it's very easy to learn. I felt like it's sort of like a cross between like SQL and PowerShell kind of in my mind. Anyway, it's pretty easy. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with it. And I'm just doing basic stuff. So I just get where the category is the audit events, right? What's greater than a day ago. And I say project, it's just projecting these columns out for me, like event time, a database name, and so on. And then I'm ordering it by the event time. I will tell you that you may see some things like entity authority system in there. And that I've only seen when I change the audit action groups with a PowerShell. Actually, I haven't seen it any other time, but I had seen it, so I wanted to warn you in case you see it. It seems really weird and nebulous. There's no statement, there's no information, there's no database. It just says the time and this and the server principal name. So you may want to filter some things out. Because you cannot, unlike SQL Server Audit, where you can say, I don't want to see this, or I just want to see this with this Azure SQL Audit stuff. You can't filter at the front end. Like you can't tell the audit, just don't capture so-and-so or capture only so-and-so. You can't do that here. So you have to filter it out, you know, on this side when you're querying. So you can add that stuff up here. You know, you can say where this and then some more stuff. And then you can say and, or you can say where. You can say where over and over, or you can say and here. It's one of those sort of an interesting, I thought it was an interesting oddity because in SQL you can't say where this and then where this, but you have to say and. Anyway, I would say custo, other people say custo. Anyway, I think it's fun in the end. At first I was confused, but now it's fun. So here's where I say, you know, you go in your log analytics workspace, you just go straight into logs and you can see this. You can just run this query and then you see down here, this is the stuff I'm talking about. Execute SQL, select this, that's schema name, all this stuff. That is the stuff that SQL Server is doing in the back, the engine's doing in the background to support some other queries running. So that's what you'll see if you leave the default. Now, yeah, like I'm saying, said before, you may or may not want to leave the default audit action groups because you will see all this other, I say junk, but I mean, it's needed. It's just maybe junk to you because that's not going to be very helpful. You're not going to change that stuff. That stuff's not changeable. Like you can only change what your users are doing, right? So that's just, it's going to be there regardless, unless you change your audit action groups or change the way people are querying, like less queries, less stuff in the background, right? So we have here, if you wanted to enable at the database level, I say maybe you had a bunch of databases on the same Azure SQL server and you only want to audit one. Maybe you really, really don't care about any of the other databases. Then you could enable it at the database level, right? So this here now, you can see we're at the SQL database level inside this SQL Server Azure database thing, right? This always catches me because I say SQL Server, I think like SQL Server. Anyway, so here it says server level. See, it calls it server level auditing. It's enabled. So that's saying to you, hey, if you enable it here, now it's going to collect it twice. It's not smart enough to say, hey, yeah, I'm already collecting and I'm not going to collect it again. It's going to collect it twice. It's just going to put it in your log analytics workspace twice. So that's why it's important to look at this. And then I wouldn't turn this on if that was already enabled. And then to note, you can't have a very custom audit action group. Say like one database, I want to get like such and such thing, like only DDL this, or in some other one, I want to see perms or something. You're kind of set to changing the audit action groups at the server level, not at the database level. Because like in SQL Server Audit, it was much more customizable in that sense that you could change it, different databases get different things and stuff. So this is a little less customizable. But like I said, I found this to be lighter weight because I just leave the default audit in place, and it doesn't seem to have it doesn't seem hard to query even large amounts of data from the log analytics workspace either. So it feels like it's more lightweight in that sense. So I don't feel as bad leaving the default audit actions in Azure SQL. Mind you, if you have a really, really busy big one, I wouldn't say that would hold there, but so far what I've seen, it seems pretty solid and they're all very lightweight. I say that. I only tell you that with SQL Server, be very careful, like on a VM, because I had a very, very busy production server. And we had, for PCI compliance, because we had credit cards in the database, and customer service had to decrypt them as part of their job, but we had to also log all of those decrypts to hit a function as a select. Good, it was a lot. It would, it was very heavy usage, high volume. So one time I tried to turn off the audit, and well, the audit wouldn't stop, but then the server wouldn't respond. And it could have been the fact that, like I said, it was so busy. It was so big. It was terabyte size. And it was so busy, like I said. And on top of it, there was no point. Like the audit will keep auditing until it can stop in SQL Server. Like it's saying, hold on, I'm auditing things. And then if you try to stop it, it could be like, oh, it should get timeout. Some timeout period exceeded error, and it will just keep going, but it didn't. It could have been like the version we were on 2014 of the service pack. Who knows? It was one of those oddities, I think, but it happened to me. So now I know. And so I warn you, the best thing is to audit the least amount you can reasonably, because otherwise you're picking through a lot of stuff anyway. It doesn't really help you. I will pause for a sec and go to the demo. So, but I'll see. Are there any questions?
No questions.
Okay. I've I just said so many things. Everybody's like, oh, this is exhausting. I don't have any questions. That happens with my managed instance one. I'll tell you that. Good God. Migrating from SQL Server to Azure Managed Instance is like, I can't even do a demo. That's like a whole day long class or something. So no, there's so few questions in that one. Anyway,
Amen.
So I know it's like a lot. And I wrote like a whole course, like a 4-project series on it. And still I was like, whew, this is a lot of work. So here we are in my Azure thing. Haven't done this demo in like over a year or so, but I set it up yesterday, even though I was like wrapping up my vacation, because I felt like I didn't want to give you a crappy demo. So here we are in our SQL database. And let's go to our auditing. Okay. So we see now, see this, the database level. So we see that it's enabled at server level. I don't have it enabled here. You could, but I wouldn't, because you don't want to do that because it's double, unless there is a like little case where you're like, well, I just want to store this somewhere else, like for safekeeping or something. I could see that, but I wouldn't put in the same exact place because I know where this is in Log Analytics. So I know. Don't put it in the same place. So anyway, I'm sure there's edge cases for this, but like what I do is I just enable at server level. Everything's going in to Log Analytics. So I will show you that because this is actually the database. So now we can see at the database level, we have some auditing here and we have it enabled here. And this is the Log Analytics. So this I know because so Hopeful Monkey came up because I was creating this all with Terraform and I had it name my resource group something like random. So anybody could use the Terraform and create a resource group that was uniquely named in a database. So it's just, it picks a random name, but man, it picked Hopeful Monkey. And I thought, good, that's so perfect. I'm like a hopeful monkey. So anyway, that was totally not me. That was just random, but Terraform stuff. So anyway, I didn't enable this down here, the Microsoft audit stuff, like the operations. But I would do that on my ones at work. I would definitely do that because this can affect something going on. And I personally just put in the same place, just so it's all together. But you know, you could put it someplace else too. You could choose some other location for it. So anyway, that's like how easy it is to set up. Like I said, I'll be presenting on this stuff in September at the Future Data Driven, so you can see how to Terraform it all too, because I have Terraformed all the audit stuff as well. So I love Terraform. I got to tell you, at first it was a little like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? But it's wonderful, actually. It's so wonderful. I can like go in there, create type some things out, put some more things in here. That's why I have so many SQL database. So this will warn, well, I actually changed them, but sometimes it warns you even when you haven't changed anything, just so you know, but it will discard those. So that's why I have all of these in here, because I was just creating them with Terraform and like testing some things out. And anyway, that's a whole long thing, because you know, the maintenance, if you worked in Azure SQL trying to run Linux maintenance, there's no job, right? There's no agent, right? So you have to figure out another way. Anyway, that's the whole thing I've been going through. So that's a side note. I see some things popping up. Does somebody have a question here? I can take a break. Let's see.
No, we were just talking through things. You know us.
Oh, I see. Hopeful Mango. I know it should be hopeful. Mango's always hopeful. He's like so amazing. Okay. Okay. Oh, I see. There's some chit-chattings. Well, anyway, let me know if there's something that pops up because I could stop for a sec.
Will do.
So, okay, cool. So anyway, oh, I was going to show you too, like when you're in the database itself and you wanted to see like your SQL database, right? And you want to see the audit logs from here, you can do that. That was that thing I mentioned to you here. Now, I never see anything here, so that's not, you know, very surprising. Like here, server audit, I never see anything here. It might be if you choose the storage option. I think I might have seen it there. I never do, so I do Log Analytics. This is always grayed out for me, so if you discover that, that's how it always is for me. I'm not sure what its purpose there is. So this is how you could get to querying the audit records from the database side. And it'll populate something for you. So this is nice if you're not sure how to create a query. Well, I'm providing you with one. All that's up in my GitHub, which is SQL Kitty. And so you can have my sample from the slides or from my repository. So, but this helps you. So like, if you don't know, so this is kind of how I started learning Custis, like, oh, this is how it does. He has a where, and it does this, and then you can run it. Let me sit for a sec. Okay, this is because I haven't done anything in the last 24 hours. So you can also set the range in the query itself, which comes in handy sometime, you know. So I'll say last 48 hours because I think I did something yesterday. So there we go. So the thing I did yesterday is down here, I created a table so that something would hit here, but then I forget that when I have the default audit action groups, a lot of stuff happens, like people logging in. I just log in and then stuff hits here too. So, you know, like when you have it, it's getting all kinds of stuff in here. So anyway, that's you can get from the database side nicely. It gives you this query already for you in case you don't know how to build a query. Then you can take this, slap it over into where I would query from is Log Analytics. This is how I like to put all my stuff together in one Log Analytics workspace. So all of my databases are in here, right? Because then you can filter. Say you only want to see one database, you can still filter it down, right? So here's the workspace summary I was mentioning that's going to be deprecated. And sometimes I'll admit to you this thing's a little wonky. It will not always show me anything in here, even though I know something has happened. Well, maybe nothing happened the last 24, maybe it's 48 now. I have found this to be inconsistent. Let's put it that way. So I like that dashboard. You saw this screenshot in my slide, but then sometimes it doesn't load, even if there's stuff. And then you can get to your logs, like I showed you from the database side over here, this thing, this way. This always pops up here. I always leave it on so you all can see it, but you can turn it off. You don't have to leave that popping up every time for you. But this audit thing does not help you with this audit, the SQL audit stuff. By the way, none of this stuff in here that I could find as I picked through, there's a lot, does not help you with any of this, my query or whatever query you decide to build from what what you figure out that you want to see is this. Nicely, there's a history. So I have my history from, this is the query from that slide on my deck. And so you can see a bunch of stuff hitting here. It's just like, namely because, oh, there's the NT authority system, because yesterday I made sure that my PowerShell worked to change the audit action groups for you, which I'll show you in a sec. But so this is what I was talking about. You might see these kind of random, like, what is this stuff? I have found this only happens when you change audit action group settings. Like you go into PowerShell and actually change stuff, and it knows this, it doesn't give you any information. I only figured that out randomly because I was changing audit action groups and that's when it happened. So anyway, so this is kind of what it looks like when you go in there and see. So I'm going to create a new table, let's call it 2 or whatever. So, and then like see that it like, yep, there it is. Okay, so then I'll tell you, when you first set up audit, patience is a virtue because it may not come filtering in right that second. So like SQL Server Audit, I've noticed, like when you're on a VM or something, it's like pretty snappy. It's coming in pretty fast right after you set up stuff. In Azure SQL, I would tell you, you could wait like 30 minutes to an hour to see stuff. Now, when you turn it on, it's not actually capturing anything. It's not getting anything. It's not getting anything from the past before you turn it on. It's like not capturing anything until you actually start seeing things filter in. So if you think, oh, I'm going crazy, did I do this wrong? I used to like turn it back off and then turn it back on again because I had no patience then, apparently. So just so you know, first time you set it up can take a while. Just so you know. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slower, just so you know. Anyway, but then when you do what I just did, like I created a table, I want to see it over here in my audit results. It can still take a minute or two to filter over here. So it's not like boom, instantaneous, like 2 seconds later, I'm seeing this create. And what day is it? It's like, what day is it? That's a good thing for me to like say, okay, hold on, let's go back for a sec here, because this is not like actually the query I wanted to run. And that's okay, because I can show you something else, because you don't have to go into the summary. Like I went down here into the summary and then clicked the logs, and then here's your workbooks, right? That's the thing I showed you, this new thing. And you can create a workbook, right? So I have this workbook I showed you I set up, and the last day, oh, there's Mango. He's like, oh, I love workbooks. Okay. So you can see now that there's still nothing from today yet, which is interesting. So it just takes a little bit. Like I was already logged in, right? So it's not showing me logging in because I'm already connected over here, right? I was already connected sitting there and I ran a create table. So it's still not here yet. So, oh, there's some stuff. See, it took a few minutes. That's what I'm saying. So I could talk, I could fill some space. And there we see it now, right? That's my create table, but you see some other stuff. Like I didn't run this stuff, right? This stuff and this. Oh, that might be me actually, because I was doing something. But so you see this here. That's what I just created, table 2, right? So it's in there now. But again, you don't have to use the summary or the workbooks. You could just come into your logs here. And again, you get this little pop-up with your queries that I have not found very useful. And then you could run this query. This is the query from the slide. It just keeps track of all your last queries, right? So that other one I ran from the database side that created the custo for me, it's in their history as well. So you can go through there. And there's a way to save your queries too if you want to come back and run this again. That's what I like about the workbook though, is like that's a good place to save your query is in that workbook. And then you can I send developers over and give them queries because sometimes they want to figure out for themselves what's going on in there. And they can just go run these as well, depending on perms. Like, I guess it depends on the perms in your environment. Well, the cat just wagged his tail into my finger. Sorry. It's a very professional operation over here, really. So anyway, here's my create table. So you can see this now. And these columns, these are the columns I find useful. There's way more columns than this too. So I got my new table in here. You know, I've got who I'm logged in as, whether it's succeeded. I've found that whether it's succeeded is a little bit nebulous in SQL Server Audit, so I'm not sure if this is entirely accurate or not. I've seen things that were true in SQL Server that I know a person did not have perms to do, so I'm not sure how it determines that. And then you get your IP and where it came from. These things can be very helpful. Additional information can sometimes have some juicy tidbits about errors. Like, so if somebody got an error on something, that can be in the additional information. So this is what I found helpful, but you can literally just query this stuff to see there's a bunch more columns in this thing. If you wanted to take off this and see, there's some of the default queries that come from the database side can actually do that. You can see all the columns and stuff in there. So, but honestly, I've done this for a long time. There's not really a lot of stuff in there that's actually super accurate and highly useful besides these columns is what I found to be the best. So let's look at oh, good. Oh, it remembered. Oh, good. I was hoping it remembered my history. So this here at the bottom, I hope you all can see that well enough. Is that like big enough? Make it a little bigger. So this is what I was talking about toward the beginning of the slide deck is you can get your policy. So in this case, I'm going to get it from you have to put your resource group name in there and your server name. And then you can see that this audit action groups, these are the default ones because I know because they're the ones, but I mean, you don't have to trust me, but these are the ones that are the default. So if I want to change it, right, I had that other query that may or may not have like saved in my history very well. See what happens. It's like, oh boy. Oh, look, I was VM list sizing. When was I doing that? Anyway, let's go back. I want to show you this really quickly so you have a feel for this. The only problem is that you don't want to watch me actually like coding on scale. You should have seen me at Group By one time when I was like in a demo that failed because I had a Linux machine. Anyway, it's a long story. I won't bore you with all those details. As I sat there coding on screen and having participants help me with my problem. Well, that doesn't seem to work very well, does it now? Look at that. I'm backspacing. What is it doing? Oh, it's backspacing. Okay. So anyway, this is from my slide now. I pulled it from another screen because I had it ready. So this is going to set us down to this many audit action groups, which seems like a lot, but it's going to get way less stuff in there. So we hit enter and we wait for a little bit. And while we wait, we can just not fill any set. What about sitting in silence? That probably feels uncomfortable to people, but this is what you'll experience is it takes a little bit to set it. But once we do this, then when I create another table, we're not going to see anything else. You're not going to get anything else in the audit because we're not getting everything, right? We're not getting all that batch completed and successful login and failed this and that and the other things, right? Well, we didn't have a failed database authentication situation, but once this updates, then we can create another table. So while we're waiting, we can come over here and see. See, it takes a little bit of time. This auditing thing requires patience. There we go. So it's done, but I will show you something. I'm going to get this audit again. And scroll up. This is what you'll see. Unfortunately, I think if you used PowerShell in your local machine, then you would get maybe the whole listing of all the audit action groups. So what I do for sanity purposes is I always set exactly the same ones. Like if I have application role change, database change, okay, I know ... means all of those other ones in that script, right, from my slide. But in this case, in the CLI, you can't see them all. So now we know that's set, and we can come over here and we can run this to create another table. Let's make sure. And then once we wait for the requisite couple of minutes, right, we would come back to this log. So you see this again, which I think is very interesting. See, NT authority system, that happens again because every time I change the audit action groups, that pops up. So it's kind of a warning to you. So like if you wondered if somebody changed something in the background with PowerShell, then that's the warning to you that they did. It's not very descriptive, but I'm not sure like how much more. I guess they can't really tell you much more because it's not really the audit's not really the place for it in this case, because it's like outside of itself. So while we wait for a sec here, I'm gonna look up the Azure module that I've been using. Oh, did somebody send a link? Because I saw that in there. Maybe I saw that in the chat when I looked for a sec. AZ, PowerShell AZ module. Yeah, okay. Anyway. So it takes a little time. See, like that's what I'm saying. So you're getting the feel for how long is it going to take for that create statement to come through, right? And it will come through. But in the interim, we'll go back to my slides so you don't just have to sit staring at my screen, because I have information for you about reporting on this stuff, right? So we'll loop back to that in a sec. Were there any questions? Did I miss anything in the chat?
Nope, we will hold up the questions that we have there until the very end because they're about best practices. Okay. And all good.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So basically centralizing your data is, I show this summary again because I loved it so much when it used to work, that I just store it all in the same log Analytics Workspace. The SQL Server, I have this more complicated setup because you have to store SQL audit files locally, and then I would have a link server and agent jobs and centralize them into a place together in one SQL Server. In Azure SQL, very easy. I just put them all in the same log Analytics Workspace. I have database. If you have databases across regions, you may want to craft something. I don't know, like if you want to put your west stuff in the east, and I don't know, like lag on that and stuff, but I have stuff mainly in the east, so I just slap it in the log Analytics Workspace in the east and call it good. But say I want to know what is going on. I don't want to have to go run a query in log Analytics Workspace and like what happened the last 24 hours. I had this with SQL Server. I'd have email sent daily to show me what had changed. Now, I will warn you that if you have the default audit action groups, this will probably not work unless you craft a query that gets you down to something reasonably sized for a CSV file, because it's not going to send an email if you have like gobs of data, right? So basically the logic app is the way I've been doing it. I'm looking at a different way because logic apps are kind of a pain to set up with Terraform. So I may be coming up with a new way to do this for that infrastructure automation process to be more, just to be a bit easier. But so that's to be determined. But right now, if you just want to set up a logic app, it's really easy. You set up a recurrence at 10 a.m. That's UTC, by the way. That audit data is UTC as well. So this will run every day at 10 a.m. UTC, which is like the middle of my night. I actually wanted to run at 10 a.m. my time. I just didn't. Doesn't matter. You can pick whatever time you want. It's going to send the last 24 hours. So I just plop that query in here, my custom query that I've been using in Log Analytics, right? And it's going to take that last 24 hours. I actually sort of redundant because I have a where here and a where there. I want to be really sure it's the last 24 hours, I guess. And what it's going to do is then create a CSV table. It's going to create a file attachment, right? So this here becomes a little more obvious when you're clicking around in there to see like value and automatic. It's sort of kind of nebulous on a screenshot, but there's really like very few options there. It's pretty clear when you're in there. And then you would just set up this, send an email, and you put your output in there. Now, one thing that caught me, see, these are pretty self-explanatory here. These are required. Of course, I don't know, this appear, this is not required. But what's funny is if you put this output, I just thought it'd put a default name here because it doesn't say it's required. But honestly, if you don't put a name here, it just does not send it at all. It just doesn't work, which was very baffling to me. So I had to come in and put this name here specifically. I don't know why I assumed it would just create a random name, but it does not, just so you know. So, and then it'll send it, right? If it's not too big, and that's when it becomes important to maybe you'll filter on this query here, because you do want to audit everything as it turns out, but you don't want to see everything in an email. You just want to see certain things. You may be able to filter that to get down to that so it fits into this file. So I'm thinking of doing this as maybe like a run book of the PowerShell and changing it all up completely because, like I said, Terraform is not so easy to do logic app. But anyway, that's sort of my reporting piece of it, right? Because I want to know what happened. I don't want to just have to go and query. I kind of think I'm running out of time. So we'll just wrap up really quickly with this extended events. You can do that stuff in Azure SQL Database. It's much more customizable. So if that's something you're interested in, but you do have to put in a storage account and you have to do a credential and use the URL and the file. So, if you're familiar, like if you've used Azure SQL Managed Instance or RDS or something, this will be very familiar to you. But, I have a presentation on extended events as well, which that stuff's up in my GitHub. So if you're not familiar with extended events, and then just really quickly managed instance, just to give you an idea, SQL Server Audit, you've got, you just right click like you do with, SQL Server. You just need a storage account, right, with the credential and the URL, that kind of stuff, which changes it up a little bit. Oh, my. I have got rid of my PowerPoint and I'm using a free solution called LibreOffice Suite. Anyway, forgot to look at my resources slide. But these are different, the links that, can help you figure out how to do all this stuff, give you a little bit more stuff. So, well, really quickly, before I say thank you and finish, I want to run in here this query because I want to see now, this is where I get confused. Why did it come through twice? Because it shouldn't. I only have server audit. I don't have a database audit. And then I've set my audit actions, and I think there may be some overlap in the audit actions. But I wanted you to see now you're not seeing all this other stuff, right? From master and this and all this other stuff that might be going on with queries people are running. I just get these 2 lines now, and I'm still trying to figure out why I get 2 of them. But that is for another time. So let me put my slide back up and okay. I barely made it to the window. Does everybody have questions?
We do.
Okay.
So big one, could you please let us know what is considered overhead, like resources using these the SQL audit cost, and also any standard settings which would be helpful to start using this in production.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why I don't have the cost stuff in here. I have the cost stuff somewhere else. Yeah, so basically with Log Analytics Workspace, it's very affordable in terms of cost because you pay for the workspace. There's like a default cost. It's very small. It's like dollars a month or something like that. And it will go up based on the size. Like if it's like some gigs amount, it'll be like 2 cents per gig per month or something like that. And then they include though in the base cost like 30 days worth of data. So, but then if you extend it, you can go up to 720 days. I personally just use the default. And so that's like basic cost. I'm surprised I don't have it in here because I thought I did. But it's very affordable, especially if you just use the just the basic 30 days that's included, right? So it's, as an example, at my office, the QA environment's very busy. Like that's the one we got like 30,000 things hitting at one time, and we were wondering why it's slow. And it's very busy environment. Well, very busy, maybe not compared to some other production loads, but it was like $80 for a month with the audit data. And there was a substantial amount of stuff because it's collecting all 30,000 of those every time. It's hitting multiple times a day, all the time, and it's collecting all the stuff in the background. So that just gives you an idea of how expensive like a fair amount of queries can cost. It's not very expensive. And overhead, I would say it's very light. It's very light. I only gave you the horror story of SQL Server Audit because that's just to mind how busy your environment is. It's very lightweight. You're not going to see some kind of performance impact or whatever, unless, like I said, if you've got like a really big Azure SQL database, you got a lot of stuff going on in there, then I could see you just want to keep your audit footprint lighter, because how are you going to go through and query all that data? That's my main thing with that.
Cool. And the other question, also about cost, because we all know cost is one of the most important things
It's
going to be
very
asked.
important. Yeah.
What do you think the average cost for a server of 10 databases and total size of 200 gigs would be for auditing? Any
Well,
rough estimates, I think, fine.
yeah. So I'll tell you that it won't be based on the size of your database, but based on how much your database is used. So you would have like 50 terabyte database sitting there, and then people only hit it once in a blue moon, then your audit costs will be very low, right? So it's more about the frequency that people are querying and how much you're auditing. So if you're in the default audit policy, the action groups, I mean, and it's like very high usage. So like the QA environment that I just used as an example, it's probably close to like 200 gigs. There's a handful of databases, but it's getting hit really hard on a regular basis. Like I said, sometimes they're hitting like 30,000 queries. They're like teeny tiny queries, but audit has to collect every single one of the queries. Doesn't matter if the query took like teeny tiny time. Audit's busy like capturing all of that. And so, like I said, that is probably comparable to what, if your database is that busy, then the size is comparable to your size in the QA environment I work in. And it's about $80 a month for the auditing.
Perfect. Well, that covers all of our questions we have out there. So I just want to remind everyone that our next presentation is on September 12th. Tame Your Unruly Data with Constraints by Rob Vook. That was going to be a fun one, I can tell just by knowing Rob. It's going to be something. So with that, I do want to thank Josephine for putting this together. This has been fun. I'm gonna love easy auditing, or at least as easy as we can get it. So with that, I do thank everyone for coming. We'll be having this out onto the DBA FunTube here rather soon. So thank you all for joining, and we will see y'all next time.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, y'all.